glaring reality in the South, and we still face it in its hidden and subtle forms all over the nation.
Words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Contain lessons for the country today, 50 years after his assassination. Today's students at SMU's Perkins School of Theology lucky to learn about that time from a man who was there, whose family was a part of the civil rights struggle in the South during that day. Dr. Theodore Walker Jr. teaches about ethics and society. So Dr. King actually spoke at SMU in like 1966. Perkins and SMU, a school with a long tradition of social service and social conscience.
Well, that's part of the Wesleyan tradition. Among other things, Wesleyans are ambitious enough to believe that they can change the world. And
you and I noticed, graduated college the same year. Coming from very different places, though. You grew up in the South during a time when you were quite aware and touched by segregation. And I grew up in the middle-class suburbs up in the North. What is Dr. King's lesson? What's your lesson 50 years later for somebody like me or for these students at SMU?
Well, for those of us in North Carolina, Martin Luther King Jr. was first and foremost a minister. And by 1967, he had come to dislike being called a civil rights leader. He preferred to be identified as a minister, a Baptist minister. And then he had two other reasons for not liking the term civil rights. One had to do with his commitment to nonviolence. Keep in mind that civil rights are about the political rights that attach to U.S. citizenship. If you take the philosophy and theology of nonviolence and place it under the category of civil rights, that reduces the philosophy of nonviolence to U.S. citizens should be nonviolent with respect to other U.S. citizens. And King had more than that in mind. He thought that nonviolence applied to relations between nations, and so he was opposed to war in Vietnam. His critics often said to him, "You shouldn't address that issue because you are a civil rights leader. And civil rights are about the rights of U.S. citizens. And North Vietnamese soldiers are not U.S. citizens. They're not protected by the U.S. Constitution. And therefore, war in Vietnam is not a civil rights issue." So the term civil rights leader was being used against King. Another reason that King didn't like the term civil rights leader is that he was firmly committed to the abolition of poverty. And
which goes beyond race.
It goes well beyond race. I mean, now we're talking about human rights, okay? And again, King's critics would say to him, well, now you're talking about economic policy, and that's not a civil rights issue. And because you're a civil rights leader, you shouldn't be talking about economic policies. Right. And King went so far as to prescribe that the U.S. Constitution needs to be amended. He called for an economic bill of rights.
And you wonder, and unfortunately we run out of time. You are a wealth of information. The kids at, young people, kids at Perkins are so lucky to have your wisdom to be shared this day. 50 years later, you still have hope, very quickly?
Yes, good. Yes. It's part of the Wesleyan tradition to believe that the world can be changed, and we at SMU are world changers.
Thank you so much. It was delightful meeting you.